Hey everyone, welcome back to The Crawl, the show where we break down the future of search, brand authority, and everything else AI is rewriting about digital marketing. I'm your host, Tristan Harris, and today's episode is a big one. It's titled, If You're Not in the AI Model, You Don't Exist. As AI overviews, search generative experience, and AI driven assistants become the primary way people discover information, the battle has shifted from simply ranking in Google to being ingested and understood by AI. So today we're diving into why being present in AI training data matters, how brands get seen by AI, and what you can do so your business doesn't get erased in the AI era. And today we have our guest, MattHarrison. MattHarrison is a tech-focused product leader with a decade of experience in the tech acquisition space, navigating the good, the bad, and the transformative. His expertise lies in identifying pain points, developing innovative solutions, and building high-performing teams to execute at scale. As Senior Vice President of Product at NextNet, Matt is a champion of AI-driven innovation, focusing on sustainable solutions that deliver measurable ROI. With a deep understanding of technology, business scalability, and market dynamics, he ensures NextNet's products remain cutting-edge and impactful. Get ready, because this is going to be a good one. Let's jump in. Hey, Matt. Thanks for joining us. How are you doing today, man?
Doing well, dude. How's everything going on your end?
Good. Hectic with everything we're working on right now that we can't talk too much about, but good. Do you mind giving us a little bit of background about yourself and how you got to where you are today?
Yeah, so as a product of the internet in the old BBS days, I basically just putzed around and played around with every aspect of the internet, Netscape, figuring out how to join every chat room under the sun in AOL and do things like that. But basically, it really all started about 15 years ago. I really got into the web hosting space, started working for a few different organizations there. And from there, it was just acquisition after acquisition, working in email marketing space, figuring out how email routing works, really just getting to put my teeth into everything I possibly could. It is also what has led into my technical SEO focus of just understanding how each and every little piece, like if a pixel takes too long to load, or you have raw JavaScript that's trying to run and there's an error, like how each and every one of these things starts to impact your business. Taking that, moving over into the NextNet side of the business, really what I did from that point was just helping to start do acquisitions of different businesses that helped us sort of diversify our landscape of all the different things that we can offer. Building out teams from all around the world, figuring out how to, work with different team members, bring out the best in everybody, and just making sure that, creating a true market dynamic driven company is exactly what we're able to do.
Awesome. So you're the Senior VP of Product here at NextNet. So what is it you'd say you do here?
That's a great question, Bob. I'd say the number one thing is just having to be on top of all of the different things that are going on. As we all know in the marketing space, everybody's got opinions. Everybody's got a different idea about how to win, how to point out the flaws in other people. And really what it comes down to is both understanding the tech changes that are taking place today and that are taking hold in the conversations and language around that. But then what's coming down as the next big thing that's going to pop out in front of everybody? How is that language going to change? How is it going to evolve? How is it that you can get teams on board with the changes that are taking place, and how can they most effectively, basically spread the word, if you will, about those changes? What are going to be the most impactful? But not only that, measuring those impacts.
Yeah, and I think that's something that has drastically increased, and kind of the craziness of what's coming next. How do we prepare for that? It's always been a thing at marketing, right? Because we're always trying to stay ahead. But with the advent of AI, it feels like we've cranked that knob up to 11, right? So that's a really good call out. I mean, things are crazy every single day. So the topic of the episode today is, if you're not in the AI models, you don't exist. So to you, what exactly does that mean in practical terms for like a business or a brand?
Well, as you know, I'm a huge fan of live music. So I kind of always think of things in terms of a concert. So if you're up there and you're doing a guitar solo and not a single person has turned around or is even paying attention to what you're doing, that's kind of what it means. Is people just don't know that you're there. They don't know what you're doing. And really what it comes down to is being able to hear the roar of the crowd. Well, think about the voice of the people that are in the crowd as those other entities that are talking about you. If I'm a brand new business and wherever it is, let's take out the digital marketing for a hot second. 20 years ago, you would have gone down to the Chamber of Commerce. You would have done every event that was there. You would have kissed babies, shaked hands, done all the rest of the stuff that you needed to do in order to get your name out there. And this is very much the same. This is just a completely different dynamic that has many of the same mechanisms in place. What it means is if you're not being talked about, people don't know where to find you. They don't know how to find you. They don't know how to get in contact with you. And as we are a digital focused, society now, if I can't reach you on my phone at the time that I have that question, I'm going to talk to the person who does, who is able to pick up my phone, who is able to answer my phone call. I mean, I remember 10 years ago, I'd fill out a web form, and if I didn't get a response back immediately saying, I've received your response, I would just go to the next person and find out, am I going to be able to have a conversation with said business about whatever it is that I need to get done sooner than later.
So to tie back into the live music concert analogy, how do AI models actually figure out which guitar solo, or in this case, like brands or sources or voices to trust?
First, what they do is they look at how many signals are out there. How many people are actually talking about it? No, the editor of Revolver magazine isn't going to be cloned 1,000 times to be able to listen to your guitar solo, but 1,000 people who want to read that article are. They are going to be the ones that want to be there. And so really it's the depth and breadth. So at first it's going to be the breadth of conversation that's taking place. If I'm a plumber in the Tampa Bay area, how many people are actually talking about it? Do I have enough reviews? Are they the right types of reviews is what comes next. Are they 1-star reviews? Are they 5-star reviews? Are you responding to what's going on out there? Are you writing relevant content that other people are going to care about? Is it going to be important at the time of being searched? Because as we look at AI models and how it is that they're sort of breaking down information and serving it to the person who's searching, really what it comes down to is they're running an inference model and they're trying to figure out, if I'm asking for plumbing help, what do I need plumbing help for? Is it a broken pipe? Is it emergency plumbing? What time of day are they asking me? Are they asking me on a Saturday at 7 o'clock? Are they asking me the day before Thanksgiving? Like, that really sets the tone on who it is that they should be recommending. So to go back to the analogy, really, how many people are in the stands roaring you on? That's a big piece. But then are the right people also roaring you on at the same time?
Yeah, I think that's very, very to the point. I think too that when it comes to those signals that you mentioned, things like reviews, content, all of that, I think that it's important to really drill down to content as well, because that's something that a lot of people aren't exactly making the correct changes to. So it comes down to, if you're trying to impress upon, that crowd that you're a great, guitar soloist, you want to go up there and play a great guitar solo, right? You may even want to go up there and say some things about, here's, how you leverage different scales and different, modes to do, an amazing solo. You don't want to go up there and talk about the top 10 best guitar soloists of all time. You don't want to go up there and, talk about what guitar is the best to solo with. Though all of that content is valid and cool and can, get you into other AI search results, if people are looking and saying, like, I want that best guitar solo, you better have that best guitar solo as your content to be able to appear. So, and I know we're sticking with this concert analogy because you and I are both big into music. But to make it so non-music freaks can relate, it's, write the content for what people are asking AI about. It's not enough to just have, one piece of content that you think talks about, your brand or topic or product. You need to kind of consider creating content around each individual way that people could find and interact with your brand.
Yes, exactly. And then to bring it back to the music, if you only know how to do one type of guitar solo and you're not opening yourselves up into different types that may fit inside the genre of music you're working within, you're going to be a one-hit wonder, and it's going to be kind of hard. And so then to break that back out into, a regular localized business, if I'm talking in the Tampa Bay area and I have absolutely nothing that talks about hurricanes or lightning strikes, I'm missing an understanding of what's happening directly in this region. And each place in the world has exact things that are like that. And if I'm in certain other industries, if I'm not talking about the products that are being used to service those types of things, I'm missing huge opportunities. I'm thinking of roofers not talking about 3M roofing panels, or even talking about what's going on with Tesla and them building out a Tesla roof and how it is that those function into other areas, right? It's really important to sort of stay on top of those topics, not necessarily because everyone is going to convert perfectly, but you don't know the intent. And so really what is best is to have an eye of what's the depth and breadth of the content that I'm creating so that I can move people in a place where we are serving them as an end business in the best way possible.
Yeah. And I think that another great point, right? There's different ways that people could search for the same service or the same thing. One example that you mentioned was, since we're both in Florida, hurricanes. So after a hurricane, there could be a lot of flooding, storm surge, and you could be left with significant water damage in your house, right? A lot of people might search for water damage restoration companies. Some people might search for flood damage restoration companies. Some people might search for how to get the water out of my house after a hurricane. All of those different ways to kind of think and find your content are things that you should consider when you're creating them. You should consider how people conversationally would talk about, like, ask a friend, how, hey, I've got a ton of water in my house after that hurricane. How can I get somebody to help me, get it out? Do you have any recommendations? Things like that. So to kind of jump to a little bit further down the conversation, how do brands actually get into AI models? So right now we've talked about content and a lot of the signals that AI kind of consumes, but are AI models relying more on like structured data, unstructured content, user behavior, or some combination of the three?
My answer to you would be yes. They're using all of them. And it makes it hard, but it also means that everybody's on a level playing field, if you will, right? So in years past, we would have talked about the HTML markup on side of your website and how it is that data gets broken down. AI models kind of break that model a little bit. And they do that because it's not really 100% relevant to them. Really what they're looking at is the content on your website. And content now no longer just means text. It now means infographics, videos, cat poetry, cat videos, cat images, like whatever it is, because what you're really doing is you have to understand you're playing in a field where a linear idea of a database of here are all of my things that exist on the x-axis and the y-axis and where do they intersect. And now I know that Matt's talking about, this type of guitar solo and not this one. So I'm only going to talk about this. And I'm just going to give the top 10 that have to do with the people who optimize for that. Nope, it's no longer that. So in the inference model, what they're using is they're starting to break down vectors. They're breaking everything down into searchable patterns and understanding that if I'm searching for guitar solos and the history of my search has been about, metal music, I'm probably not looking for a Dave Matthews Band, guitar solo.
Who is?
Everybody where I went to college. But really, it's about understanding those different inferences and how they sort of play into each other. So if I want to be found, I need to exist. I need to have a voice that's out there. And either I can carry the voice with the content that's on my website, or I can ask others to carry my voice too by digital PR campaigns, different things that are out there, being on business listings. But one of the biggest ones that are out there that actually does move the needle for people pretty easily are review and reputation sites. GBP, free for everybody. Setting it up is a great way for you to get your information out there. Same thing with Yelp, Angie's List. And just understanding how the different AI models are leveraging these different types of things allows you to be on there. So structured data is important. Unstructured content is also important, and then user behavior. So each platform is actually measuring how it is that you're interacting with it. Perplexity is my favorite example, just because I think somebody was able to break it down somewhat easily, very, very quickly early on. But if I'm searching for something and it gives me some well-known sources and then like bobscoolmarketingblog.com, it's going to be able to tell really quickly that bobscoolmarketingblog.com isn't getting a lot of likes, clicks, or anything on it. And so it can cycle through that relatively quickly. So now it's looking at my individual patterns, which is super duper helpful because if I go to Perplexity again, it knows don't show me poorly rated marketing blogs. But the other side is, what does this look like in aggregate? So for each and every one of the platforms, you got a thumbs up or a thumbs down. You can leave feedback on them, and all of this gets used. This is really no different than how Google search has operated specifically. I mean, we're all used to search. So if I see that, number one is, everybody who clicks on number one on average stays about 45 seconds, backs out, and then it goes to either 2 or 3. Number one becomes 7 pretty quickly, and 2 and 3 are now vying for the top spot because all of these platforms and Google historically have basically wanted you to stay with inside of their system. Google is a fun, cool verb because that's where you go to find out information. And all of these places want to be the next verb, and so they want to keep you inside of that too. The complexities of it are, how can I infer what you're looking at based on your historical preferences, how it is that you click on different things, and then what is getting you to come back again, right? If each and every one of them has a free model, they need you day in, day out. If you're paying for it, now they need to make sure that they're giving you the most relevant information at the most relevant time. And if you're paying for the highest level tier of whatever it is, they have to make sure that that service is the best that it can possibly be, because it's about getting you to return. And sometimes that means you're in a new, cool, walled off environment where they want to serve everything inside of the AI itself and the LLM. And then other times it's really about just making sure that you have a good feeling about what you've received so that you can come back again.
Yeah, those usage analytics are a very big part, historically, obviously, of Google, right? And there were some leaks a while ago that, we saw some tracking on the Google Chrome side that would track how users interacted with sites, et cetera, and kind of feedback that back into the model. And I think with the example of AI, all that's just being done up front by the user directly into the AI model, right? So those usage analytics are very important. And when you're creating content, it's almost kind of this weird, dichotomy of, do I create content that's really short, sweet, to the point to win the AI citation? Because a lot of the times that's what they're looking for educational searches. Or do I create content that's more in depth that will have people more interacting with my brand and, kind of stay longer, all of those things. So that's kind of a really interesting way to think about this, is not beyond how do you get your brand cited in AI, is how do you get your brand into a conversation with an end user with AI, so they start asking more about your brand and more about, okay, well, what does NextNet say about XYZ? And then continue having that conversation, so those usage signals get fed back into the kind of the machine to keep pushing things along.
Yes, and I think another important distinction to make is when you have a larger corpus of data that the AI can work through, they can start to answer questions that your clients may not have been thinking of yet. And sometimes that can be dangerous because they could be putting information out there that may not be exactly sound to what you're looking for. But when you have a large corpus of data, you can actually fight against those types of things and then make sure that you're the topic of discussion as being the expert that's in that space.
That's interesting. And that also plays into some other traditional, digital marketing things when it comes to building that digital footprint, PR, trying to become that expert that gets quoted in media, all of those things. So it's kind of interesting. To touch back, though, to that discussion around the digital footprint, right, and how that kind of influences AI visibility. We got into all the different things when you talked about reviews, when you talked about media mentions, all of that. How can a small business realistically compete in a landscape like this? Or is this kind of now a big brand? Do they have a big advantage in the game now? Or conversely, is it the Wild West? Is it homesteading, California? Is it a land grab to go and get? And is there something that small businesses can do?
Yeah, I would liken it more to the Wild West, only because I think it is easy to say and throw your hands up and say, oh, big business can come in and do whatever. Like Surf Pros, oh man, they're going to be the biggest ones of all time and all the rest of it. But there are going to be things that they don't get right. There are
Yeah,
going to be topics of conversation that they're not going to cover. It doesn't mean that they're not really great at what they do, but there is so much room that's going to be inside of it. I would say time is of the essence for everybody. Um, I think you can look at the dominance of Google and you could go talk about the early aughts and the Wild West that existed there, and it was gold rush and it existed for a pretty long time. Whereas now I think it's a very short period of time, but I also think that it's staying on top of what is new and evolving and coming out faster than anything else, right? I can point to you and say GBP is the best place for you to go right now until it's not. A smaller business is going to be more nimble to find the next place that is being found, because you also have to understand you're operating in a space where it's 4 or 5 large players who are trying to differentiate themselves. And so each one is going to have a different desire or partner that they're working with to end up getting that end user to stay with inside of their platform. Perplexity is a great example of this. If I ask GBP, or I'm sorry, if I ask Gemini, what's the best restaurants in St. Petersburg, Florida to go to, it's going to give me, GBP answers. It might give me some Yelp stuff that it was able to scrape before it was stopped. But it's kind of going to stop there. TripAdvisor is what Perplexity uses in this area. So understanding who your core demographic and who your core market is, and the next thing that's going to pop up, dare I say, Quora may not be making a comeback anytime soon, but a new Quora might pop up and be the place that everybody's going to. Finding out from Google that it was recommended, glue on pizzas didn't exactly enamor the Reddit community to the rest of the internet, but there may be another place that pops up soon where all of a sudden, you can have your answers inside of there, or you can do things in a much better way. Real estate is such a right place right now where there's so many different directories that are popping up where you can have your information, and they're all getting scraped at the same speed, and falling into that corpus of data. Now, if I'm a real estate agent, maybe Claude is going to recommend things out of Zillow or 5 other directories at the same place, and actually it turns out it's the number of places they can cite that you're in that is now making that person most comfortable. To make something a little bit more apropos, there was a recent study that had gone out, I believe it was by Seer Interactive. Actually, I recall that it was specifically, where they say that if you're in AI overviews, that ended up being like the secondary source for what you were showing up when it was in paid and organic. So if you're in the top 10 SERP for paid or in organic and you're not showing up in AI overviews, it kind of diminished where you were in that spot. And the same thing with paid. Like if I'm paying for, best hot dog corner spot in Tampa, Florida, and I'm not even mentioned as a great hot dog place in Tampa, Florida in AI overviews, maybe they're not going to come out and see me.
yeah. So there's kind of two things that I want to touch on from that. One is there's the idea of AI isn't the only touch point, right? So that could be the recommendations you get, and then they might go further. So I don't think maybe with a hot dog cart somebody is willing to roll the dice and just go with the first result from AI search. But with higher ticket services, it's probably not the case, right? So they might see that recommendation and then go to the site, do their due diligence, look at reviews elsewhere, stuff along those lines. Now, AI in the future and currently, and also, probably a lot more so in the future, are going to try to keep you in their own ecosystem. So they're going to try to make sure that they're pulling everything. They're going to find the points that people are bouncing off. They're going to try to kind of keep everything in there. Another point you touched on earlier is something I think is worth talking about. Our guest last week, Logan Friedman, who's the head of global search for a company called ManyChat. He and I got in a discussion about niching down with content. So finding ways that these smaller brands can win individual areas. So if you're a clothing company, for example, and you're competing against, Old Navy and Gap and all of these big companies, how do you win an AI search against these bigger brands? And something that we got into a deep discussion about was niching down into individual areas. So figuring out what sets you apart that people care about. So the caveat there is, if you have something really weird that nobody really cares about, that's probably not the right choice to make. But creating content around what makes you unique. So if your company only creates yellow raincoats, create content around all of that, claim that space, niche down and make that, stake your flag there, right? Because brands like, Gap, they're trying to go on a wider approach and they're not going to niche down and go for, stuff like that. So that's one area that brands can kind of do some future proofing a little bit. What else do you think when it comes to brands trying to future proof against the advent of AI and the changes that are coming at almost an alarming rate? What kind of things do you think would be impactful?
I think it's understanding your industry and your industry space and what gets cited the most. So again, I think what you're talking about niching down when it comes to yellow raincoat, I'm already thinking of what are the different shades of yellow? What's the material that it's made out of?
Yep.
The thickness based on where you live. Like the rain that we have here is going to be very different than what they have in Seattle, and the types of materials that stand up to that. I mean, you're exactly right. But if I'm a raincoat connoisseur and I want to know all about that, then I'm probably going to want to also be talking about my brand or my products inside of these different areas where people are going to. I worked on a bunch of cars for a number of years, and so I can tell you, like, when I search for different types of parts, I end up in the forums of those places because they're the ones that have the most content. So if I'm a Volkswagen person, VW Vortex isn't going to be a bad place for me to talk about my brand and the types of things that I'm doing, right? And understanding those spaces is really important, not just for the people who are most, driven by that type of brand or that type of product, but everyday people too. If I'm searching for a roofer here in Tampa, I'm probably, much more general. And then as I find someone, I start to, drill down a little bit further into the things that matter the most to me. That's when I would start reading reviews. But when I did that, I wasn't just reading Google Business Profile reviews. I was reading reviews of every place I could possibly find, even some weird niche places, because I just wanted to make sure that somebody didn't say, hey, I know I have a 20-year warranty on this roof and I made it 17,
Yeah.
But it is understanding just from a client's perspective, where are they going? How are they trying to find information?
Yeah, that's a very good point. And I think that a lot of people got very used to over the last couple of years when they bought something big or something that was expensive, going to Google and typing in, roofing business name reviews, Reddit, and hitting search and trying to find that real voice. And I think AI is definitely replicating that. I mean, we saw a partnership with Reddit early on in the game, where they could consume all of their content and stuff like that. So I think that that's definitely a very valid point, is finding those more niche places that people talk about these brands. That's going to be very, very valuable.
Yeah. And there was like 2 years ago, I did a talk on something called Google dorking. And basically all it is just utilizing Google search in a different way that gave you very specific results, right? And that's kind of what's happening here. I would say when you looked at the sort of mass adoption of AI in the beginning, when OpenAI opened it up, it was so much, right? You didn't realize I could type in anything I wanted. And then when ChatGPT came out, and then you see $200,000, $300,000, $400,000 a year jobs for prompt engineering, and you just realized we were all secretly the prompt engineer. We just had to open up our minds a little bit more in order to understand I'm going to have a conversation with this thing. And then when you play with other tools, and even AI mode does this to some extent, you're seeing how it's reasoning with itself and how it's trying to figure out. And so as you watch it play through, you can start to understand, but this is all meant to mimic how your end consumer is also doing that too. Google's at an advantage/disadvantage. They know the progress. Like if I start searching best Tampa roofers, and then I go price of roofing in Tampa, major complaints, or look at the reviews, like it's able to see that pattern and understand how to negotiate down what the intent is going to be, because Google wants me to stay in their ecosystem just like OpenAI does, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And everything comes down to what is the intent of that searcher and what it is that they're trying to do. And we're going to find ourselves in a place really, really soon, if not aspects being tested right now where I'm trying to get tires replaced on my car, and we talk about this one internally a ton, so that's why it comes to mind so easily. But if I'm trying
Sick of
to do
talking
that,
about tires.
I know we won't talk. Okay, marble. I need to find a marble shop so I can sell my marbles, whatever I have left. And basically, it'll just kind of go down and negotiate and find where's the best place to go. So if I want to get my marbles appraised, and I'm working in a platform where they're able to scrape the calendar of that person, I can book directly inside of it today. And then I can get a correspondence that states, hey, Matt, we can talk about your marbles, losing them, finding them, whatever you need to do with your marbles. And we can go book a call and we can go find out, hey, this is what's going on. And then that person has been able to stay within inside of that ecosystem. To liken that to something everybody does every single day, it's like being in Amazon, right? If I go to Amazon and I'm looking up a product, I'm not leaving Amazon to go to Anchor to buy the best battery product. I'm staying inside of Amazon to be able to do it. And that's a lot of what we're seeing here is how do you negotiate all of those different things down, having that corpus of data that can now be hyper fixated on what the intent should be, and then moving it down to the interaction of commerce.
Yeah, makes sense. And I think that Amazon example is great because even in a lot of cases, they're not leaving that ecosystem to go double check reviews elsewhere. They're not leaving that ecosystem to find product specs or anything like that. And that's definitely the way it's going to go. Speaking of losing your marbles, though, what industries do you think are about to be disrupted heavily by AI assisted, discovery? And what should people do to prepare for that?
Oh man.
I've got my own opinions.
Yeah. Why don't you give me your opinion so I can formulate this and put it into a marble example?
Perfect. So I think the biggest risk short term right now, and something we're already starting to see, anything e-commerce is going to be pretty heavily beat up over the coming probably 6 months at the latest, is my guess, my theory, right? People that are relying on, people coming to their site and a pop-up with some kind of call to action, you've seen them all, the little spinning wheel to get your discount and like all the little annoying, tricks that people use to try to force a purchase ASAP. All that's going to be gone. That's all you're going to be selling those products only if AI is recommending them to the people that are searching for them. That's my alarmist tinfoil hat theory. And I feel like it's being backed by some of the things we're seeing out there. So tell me, how do we make that about marbles?
Cool. So I can't. Unless the spinning wheel looks honestly like a marble. I don't think you're too far off. I think we've been seeing that for a while. I mean, the OpenAI discussion around how this impacted, unfortunately, I hate to lump them into your example, but just regular content writers, they're already being disrupted. All of their content is going inside of that, but really at the end of the day, its impact is ads, right? So it's the ad market. That's the one that's going to be impacted the most. I think you're going to see like a massive change and redevelopment on how those things are going to look. I mean, what was it, 2 weeks ago, we were seeing AI mode all of a sudden was having ads tested inside of it. How are ads going to fit inside of it? I think that's going to be a relatively huge change.
And what was it, like last week that OpenAI, it was leaked that they were looking into ads, that they were going to launch ads in OpenAI?
Yeah, you could see it in the console level. You could see where it's been testing too, and it really has to do with like the most highest intent type of things. Like they're not going to go in and be like, "Hey, I want to find my favorite or recipes." Probably isn't going to be the place that it's starting first, but there are other areas that they know that they can win relatively quickly. I was looking at.
It's not going to be for like.
Yeah.
It's not going to be for like Matt's Marble Mansion if somebody is asking, how to play marbles. That's not going to be where they're displaying ads. It's going to be on those very high intent prompts, which makes sense. One, because they want a high rate, but two, they also don't want to alienate their user base. And I interrupted solely so I could say Matt's Marble Mansion. So sorry, please go on.
Alliteration's always been fun.
It has been,
Um,
yeah.
yeah, I would honestly say I I don't know that I have better examples. I think that more of the disruptions that you're going to see are going to be about client acquisition on the whole, right? And that goes back to what I was talking about when it comes to speed. If you're not being found other places or being talked about in other places, that's the biggest disruption to me. Um, just because the eyeballs just aren't going to be there. Like they're just not going to be. And Google at one point was just only vying for the one person who was searching at that time. So it made sense that they were trying to be, trying to outdo everybody else. They, paying Firefox money, paying Apple money, and all the rest to get them to stay inside of that ecosystem. Now they have to compete with all of those things. And I think you're going to see the bigger shakeup when it comes to what the traditional SERPs have looked like. But then also noticing how it is that everybody is interacting with commerce that is there. When we saw such a huge proliferation of AI mode or AI overviews across everybody, it was low intent. The intent was, educational, informational type stuff. That's where you saw like the biggest adoption. But you also found out that people from that were then clicking 2 or 3 links deeper and then actually taking action. They were doing something. They were booking calls. They were doing all the rest of it and finding out how to get people to stay inside of that ecosystem. When I think of disruption, I think of on some level like a mass style, almost like culling of a type of system that's out there. I don't think ads are ever going to go away. I just think that they're going to change again. If you play mobile games on your phone, you realize that everything is an ad at this point.
Yeah, everything is.
So
Yeah.
I think that's where ads end up going. Is it's more interactive. It's 1v1. Exactly what's happening. I get that spinning wheel all the beeping time. I think that those are the areas that are easiest for it to disrupt. I also know that there's a lot of struggle when it comes to other areas of disruption. So, for example, like the chatbots, at one point, every website wanted to have a chatbot on it. Every website wanted to have their entire FAQ. And then the famous thing of, a Midwestern Chevrolet dealership, somebody was able to convince it to agree to terms that we're going to make the dealership go out of business relatively quickly. I mean, I think those are going to be areas that people are going to test the bounds as much as possible. But I do think the readoption of how e-commerce is going to be taking place, that's the biggest disruption.
Yeah, I agree 100%. And the next question that I'll pose then is how long do you think, like that's obvious, e-com, direct product purchase. How long until you think things like Calendly book a meeting for companies like agencies that sell a service? How long do you think until that's being pulled into these LLMs?
If it takes longer than Q2 of 2026, I would be massively shocked.
Yeah.
I think by end of Q1, I think you're really going to start to see AI native born solutions that are going to try to buck the trend as much as possible. But in order to get mass adoption, I mean, you're thinking of like Calendly, Chili Piper, you have huge user bases that need to get put inside of that. And as a group that has gone through multiple iteration and changes with these types of things, it's no small feat. So I think OpenAI, Claude, all the rest of them, that's probably where they're going next and trying to figure out how do I get it into that. Same thing with, if I'm an e-commerce platform, and just to use an analogy of like Amazon, the anti-Amazon to me is one that is a similar framework, but fractured across the entire ecosystem. That's Shopify, right? But it's all based on Ruby on Rails. And if there was a way to integrate it into something like that, where you could have commerce happen directly inside of it and have Shopify Pay as a button inside of it, we've all seen things like this being tested out. That to me is massive. That to me is why speed is important.
Yeah. And I agree. I think that's the direction we're very, very quickly hurtling towards. So we're coming up. We've got probably 15 minutes or so left. Do you want to give like one piece of kind of closing advice to any brand out there that's worried about being left out of AI models?
Yeah, cool. So whatever you're thinking about doing it now. Do it now, like right now. After, like when you're done with this, go do it.
Pause the podcast now. Go do it. Yeah. Come back.
Write it out. Come up with a plan. What is your timeline? And go do it now. Don't wait.
Yeah.
And it doesn't matter if you're wrong. The worst thing that happened is you got more content out about whatever it was,
Yeah.
or you signed up for the newest widget that you think might win, because those exercises in getting out there are the most important pieces. To go back to my really, really early example with the Chamber of Commerce, the hardest thing about joining the Chamber of Commerce is walking through the door and signing up. After that, everybody wants to be your friend because you're now in a whole other club and group of people who are like-minded and they want to see you be successful in a local arena.
Yeah.
It's kind of the same thing here. You have an idea, go do it.
Yeah, and I think that the opportunity cost of moving quickly and just trying to make it work is so low compared to the threat of not doing anything and just being invisible, right? So to kind of tie it back into this, you don't want to be AI invisible, right? You want to appear in these LLMs. So thank you, Matt. I really appreciate this whole discussion. We have one last thing for you, though. We like to do this like lightning round. It's a game we're calling in or out of the model. So I'm going to say a word. You're going to give us just the quick take on whether each topic is becoming more or less important for AI visibility, and any quick like things like tidbits, advice, anything like that. Feel free. You can go. Don't go too crazy verbose about it, but cool. You ready? All right. Backlinks.
In.
All right, but why?
Okay. You want to know why? This is where I get verbose. No. That's who's talking about you, right? It's important. Now, are all backlinks the same? No, they never have been. So just kind of the same idea.
Yeah, no, I feel like that's probably the one that most people familiar with organic search are already kind of get, you know. Next, author reputation for the content that's being put out there.
I can see extremes where it would be important. I can also see that in the grand scheme of things, it's probably not going to be that big of a deal.
Review volume.
And that has to do just with more and more reviews that are out there, more and more people that are talking about you, more and more data points. You know, if we're just going to liken it to like reviews on different platforms, that's where multimodal is important. Pictures, videos. You know, somebody redid, a wall in a house, taking a picture of it, being able to share it on there. Those are super important things.
Yeah, and I think that's one thing to just kind of kill the whole idea of the lightning round. I think that's one thing that's super important that a lot of small businesses and local businesses don't do. When you're going out and you're Matt's plumbing, house, and you're going out and fixing somebody's shower, take a photo of what you've done, share it, do all of those little things. It takes 5 minutes, maybe, for each job you do, and it kind of gives us more data points to, kind of help contextualize what you do and all of that.
One thing to add on to it. Ate at a restaurant last year, and there was a huge party of us. It was about 18, and the waiter stood outside and had us all scan a QR code to leave him a review. Now, not all of us did it or all the rest of it, but he got a lot more reviews than he would have had he never asked. And that's another big piece of that puzzle. Speed. Ask. You're not sure how you're being perceived when the services that you're doing? Ask. It's the same thing that we do as a business. I'm not going to know whether or not we're giving you the best services possible if I'm not willing to ask the question.
I want to feel it was like, I feel like it was 2017, 2018 maybe, when all of a sudden you started going out to eat and there were places that were offering you like 5% discount on your bill if you left a review, right? Mm-hmm. That kind of died off, and I still see it sometimes, but not as often. But that's coming back to relevance, right?
Yeah.
That's going to be very important. Next on the list, topical authority.
I think it's in two different phases. One is you have to have the depth of content about your topic. That gains you perception of being authoritative, and that's how it links together with the backlinks one. And that's where you have the corpus of data, but now people are referencing your corpus of data. And so to me, it's all about building that relationship between those two pieces.
Makes sense. Content freshness. How important do you think freshness versus content depth is? Obviously, you want both.
Yeah. To me, content freshness is like the secondary approach to content depth. And reason for that is I always liken this to like money pages. So if we're going to go like old 2008, 2009, we're talking about money pages, and that's the one that, that's your converting page. That's the one that is most important. Well, your content freshness and updating it and keeping it relevant is like you having a 2018 blog post about how to do email marketing. And what do? You don't create a 2019 version of that. You update the 2018 version of it and you change the URL and you create a 301 redirect. That's the content freshness. You know it's your money page, you know what's driving, but you know the most important factor to all of it is when was this last updated and how can it be served in the best way possible?
Makes sense. Social proof.
But I would say that also, I mean, depending on how you're sort of looking at, so that's your review, somewhat of that, of like if you're working with different industry, titans that are out there, I think it's really important for them to leave you reviews. But yeah, I think that's where I'll leave the answer.
Long form content. So think like traditional pillar pages, all that super deep, stuff that we've traditionally done.
Yes. I think that these are important, but I think you also have to have an understanding of who your audience is at that point. When you're writing long form content, this is the content that gets chunked, vectored, or splintered apart and then reserved to that person that's in the LLMs. So I do think you have to have a somewhat different approach for something like that. But the internal example that I use before everybody rolls their eyes is if I'm an arborist, I need to have a bunch of different pages that are talking about a bunch of different trees. But if I had one long form piece of content that was all about deciduous trees, I would then know that that can be chunked up and parsed and then served out to a person in the best way possible. From that standpoint, I think it's vitally important because you can use content in many, many different ways. Yeah.
Makes perfect sense. And I agree with you. And I think that another thing is as things get revised down the road and as over time these models iterate to find what's going to be best for the user, that depth is going to become more and more important, right? That length of content and being able to not just say like it's just supposed to address as a single little thing. It's a chunk of a much longer piece of content that kind of shows the expertise around that. I think that will become more and more valuable down the road, if it isn't already. Next on the list, brand search volume.
I think your branded visibility is massively important. And I think this is where you see the biggest change when it comes to traditional search is for the longest time we were talking about do follow, no follow. Sponsored, UGC. AIs don't care about that. What they're looking for is that if we're talking about my roofing company, that my roofing company is being talked about. You can have a link, you don't have a link, but if the brand is being mentioned there, it's in the corpus of data and it can be referred back to. And that's vitally important when being served information through the LLMs.
Thank you. Last one, PR citations, my personal favorite.
In on every level. This goes back to item number one with backlinks. Backlinks are not all the same. PR citations are massively important and probably towards the top of that. They really do drive the conversation. And the nice thing about it is they are talking about it from an organic standpoint, an organic place on pieces that are being written with an actual perspective. So if you want to talk about topical authority or the reputation of the author, that's a place where you can get both of those things. Because your brand is being talked about when it comes to a point of view.
Yep. I agree wholeheartedly. And, I've always been biased towards, PR citations and media mentions for SEO, but this feels like one of the things that overlaps very well between traditional search and AI search. So thank you, Matt. That's all the time we have today. Matt, I really appreciate you coming on the show today and helping give some real tangible insights on what brands can do to prepare for the today and for the future of AI search. Everybody, if you love this conversation, please make sure to hit follow, drop a review, share the episode with anyone who needs to level up their AI era strategy. And we will see you next time.